This is the year you're going to reduce your yarn stash, and to help you with that, I have made a yarn stash busting pattern roundup. In this pattern roundup, there are 35 patterns, including free patterns, beginner-friendly patterns, and all of the links will be in a document in the description below. And these patterns are great for reducing your very large acrylic stash if you're anything like me. There's also patterns for cotton yarn, for worsted weight, and aran weight yarns. So grab yourself a project to work on while I go through the patterns. I also have something I'll be working on in this video too, which is a yarn stash busting blanket, which I'll be talking about a bit later in the video, though I don't know how much I'm going to be able to do on this because I'm not very good at talking and crocheting at the same time. But with that in mind, let's get into the pattern roundup. The first category we're going to start off with today is the clothing category, and I have 10 patterns for you. The granny hexagon cardigan pattern is like the ultimate yarn stash busting clothing pattern. You can use so many different colored yarns. You can use worsted weight yarns or aran weight, cotton or acrylic. You could make something very rainbow and colorful, or you could use only a few colors. It's totally up to you. I have included this pattern by Passionate Kelsey. I feel like she's the queen of granny stitch cardigans and granny stitch anything really. But you can, of course, find free tutorials on YouTube for granny stitch cardigans. The next two patterns are by the same designer, and in the listing when I searched yarn stash busting patterns, it actually says that this is the ultimate stash busting cardigan, and you can see why. There are so many different colored yarns in this cardigan, and it is just gorgeous. I love the different stitches on it. There's a real variation of stitches, and I think it just looks stunning. So we have the cardigan version, and then we also have the jumper version, which again, you could use so many different yarns in your stash. You could use small amounts of yarn, especially for around the arms, and you could make this jumper longer if you wanted to, or keep it cropped at the length that she has in this picture. This colorful striped crochet cardigan pattern is just adorable. This pattern actually has instructions from newborn all the way up to adult size. So you could make yourself one, you could make your kids and your nieces and your nephews and just everyone you know one of these cardigans. I love the buttons in the middle. And in this picture, you can see that there's no order with the colors. It's just random, but it still looks really gorgeous. This Mystery Retro Daisy Granny Square Cardigan crochet pattern is again another fantastic yarn stash busting pattern. I believe that the yarn they've used in this one is worsted weight, though I could be wrong, I'm not sure, but I think this is just gorgeous. I saw a lot of people doing this cardigan last year where they would make it a challenge where they would have colors from their yarn stash on little pieces of paper in a container of sorts, and they would pull three colors out of that jar, and then they would make one of the granny squares. And I just think it turns out so adorable. You could group the colors based on what kind of theme they are. So you could go with pastels or bright colors or whatever you liked. And then they all kind of tie in really well. But it also looks really great as a randomized kind of cardigan. Something I did mean to mention at the beginning is that you can absolutely just go and find a granny square pattern or tutorial and make things from that. So if you just grabbed the pattern and grabbed a bunch of different colored yarns and made random granny squares and put them all together, you could make a cardigan like this one. It doesn't just have to be the daisy, retro daisy granny square. It could be literally anything you like. This odds and ends sweater is perfect for getting rid of those small amounts of yarn that you might have in your stash. And also I thought I would mention Craft and a Cuppa has really awesome patterns. She has a bunch of YouTube tutorials too, including a granny stitch hexagon cardigan that I highly recommend. I used that one when I was a beginner. But this is a gorgeous jumper. I really love it, and you could absolutely get through all of those little bits of yarn in your stash with this pattern. I thought I'd include something a little bit different, a bit sort of whimsical. This pattern is the Sierra Mandela sweater, and I thought it was gorgeous. It looks like you make the mandala shape start up and then you make the rest of the cardigan, so the sleeves and everything from the mandala. And again, you could use so many different colored yarns and it would look very pretty, especially if you used more colors. I think it would look even more awesome. I think anything Mandela related is fantastic for using up lots of different colors. I have one more cardigan related pattern for you, and it is this scrappy cardi crochet pattern. Again, I think it would be perfect for using up your yarn scraps. And I love how in this cardigan, it's got different stitches for each row. I just think it looks super gorgeous, and I am definitely putting that on my list of crochet projects for this winter. The first few patterns I talked about were more for winter wearables. This pattern is something you could wear in early autumn and the end of summer. It is the Olivia Shrug pattern. Now I know in this picture it has just one color yarn, but you could absolutely use up a bunch of different cotton yarns and it would look really beautiful. It is also made with treble crochets, I believe, so it would be pretty quick to make up, and I just love those gorgeous sleeves. This pattern I think I've mentioned in previous clothing related patterns before, and I do own this pattern. It is actually a free pattern. I forgot to mention that just before. And I haven't made it yet, but it's definitely on my list of patterns to make this year. The final pattern that I have for you for the clothing section of this pattern roundup is this rainbow tank top crochet pattern. I just think it is gorgeous. There's so many different colors, so you could really get through your cotton yarn stash. I think you could also potentially add sleeves to this or make it a little bit longer if you wanted to. I'm someone who likes to wear more long things rather than cropped. But yes, a perfect summery yarn stash busting project. The next category I have for this pattern roundup is accessories. We have a mixture of scarves and hats and bags, so let's get into it. We're starting off with scarves, and this first scarf pattern is by the lovely HT Georgie Girl. It is the stash busting scarf, and as you can see, there are so many different yarns used in this. We've got variegated yarn, which is something that's difficult to use up in stash busting projects. I think every other pattern I've mentioned so far have been more solid colors, but this one has some variegated yarns. We've also got a checkerboard pattern there, and I just think it is very groovy and bright and beautiful for winter. This fall into winter scarf is a beautiful chevron pattern. Again, perfect for getting through all of your, I'm assuming, worsted weight yarns. It looks super warm and just really pretty. This boho scarf is actually by the same pattern designer as the chevron fall into winter scarf pattern I mentioned before this one. And I think a lot of patterns by the Hat and I would actually be perfect as stash busting projects just because they're so colorful. I just think it is stunning. We've got a bobble stitch and I'm assuming single crochets or double crochets, but it's a beautiful scarf pattern and I like the grouping of the warm colors and the cooler colors. It just looks gorgeous. Blondie Knots released this YouTube tutorial for the moss stitch scarf pattern last year, and I think a lot of us were just obsessed. As you can see, there's so many different colors that you can use, and I love the way she has done the tassels in this tutorial. You should definitely go and check it out. This scarf pattern is going to be the one that I make next because I just think it'll be perfect for using up my yarn stash, especially my worsted weight acrylic yarn stash. It's just gorgeous. Moving on to some bag patterns, and we're starting off with this granny stitch bag pattern. This would be perfect for using up your cotton yarns, and I just think it is gorgeous. Anything granny stitch is going to be pretty simple to do. And I've actually had my eye on this pattern recently because I have been wanting to make more bags for myself. So yes, a perfect cotton yarn stash busting project. Another granny stitch related bag pattern is this crochet granny square crossbody bag pattern, and it would be even easier than the previous pattern that I mentioned. You would just simply make 2 granny squares, and then you would do what I believe is single crochets 4 rows for the straps. So that is perfect for beginners, and it looks really cute. You could make it as big or as little as you like. Another scrap yarn using pattern by Sunflower and Crochet is this Scrappy Together bag pattern, which is actually a free pattern on her Ko-fi, coffee, whatever it's called. This is a gorgeous bag pattern. I saw it last year when the scrappy yarn crochet pattern projects were really popular, and I really wanted to make it. I just never got around to it. But from the looks of it, you would actually double strand the yarn to make the double crochets for this bag. So it would be fantastic for getting through your yarn stash. You could potentially use acrylic yarn for this if you wanted to. I would recommend lining it, but it's probably best with cotton yarn. A fantastic smaller sized project for getting through your yarn stash is making beanies, and this YouTube tutorial by Hey It's Mel B for her no bunch beanie is fantastic. I know in the picture she's got one color, but usually they tend to only take 1 to 2 skeins of yarn or balls of yarn. But you could absolutely do different colors. You could alternate between 2 colors, or you could do a bunch of different colors. You would have some ends to sew in, which is unfortunately what you would have to do for most of the projects in this pattern roundup. But it would look super gorgeous with lots of different colors. Or you could use your variegated yarn stash for this as well. And for summer, you're going to be wanting to make some bucket hats. There are so many bucket hat tutorials on YouTube and patterns on Etsy, but I thought I would include the kelp bucket hat, which was released last year by Passionate Kelsey, and everyone loved that pattern. I own that pattern, and I, of course, made myself one of these bucket hats. It is a mix of granny stitch and some other stitches, and it's just gorgeous. You could use 3 different colored cotton yarns, or you could just use as many cotton yarns as you like. So bucket hats and beanies are great as hat related small yarn stash busting projects. The final project I'm going to talk to you about for this category is scrunchies. They're great for stash busting, especially small amounts of yarn. You can make them for your friends. They don't really do well at markets here in Australia, but I believe they sell well in other countries. I've seen Passionate Kelsey making tons of scrunchies, but I thought I would include this ruffle scrunchie crochet pattern. I think it is just so gorgeous. And there are 2 different colored yarns in this scrunchie, and you could use cotton or acrylic, I believe. I think it just looks really cute. Our next category is blankets, and if there is ever a project for you to get through your yarn stash, especially if you have multiple balls of yarns of yarn that you're wanting to get through, it is blankets. You need to make yourself a yarn stash busting blanket. And the first blanket pattern I thought I would talk about is this crochet stitch sampler blanket pattern. It is so beautiful, and I really love that it's got so many different types of stitches. This is fantastic for beginners wanting to learn different stitch types, or even just someone. I know that I don't actually know all of the stitches in this blanket. So for someone like me who wants to broaden my stitch knowledge, you could change the yarn that you are using for each row, and it just would be perfect for getting through your yarn stash as well as learning some new stitches. This stripes and colors blanket pattern is another one that has different stitches on each row, though not as many different stitches, and you would be able to memorize the pattern pretty quickly. but it would be perfect for getting through a bunch of your yarn stash. Any of the Betty McKnit patterns are fantastic for getting through yarn stashes. So the ones I'm going to talk to you about today are the 6-day man blanket, which is actually the pattern for the blanket that I am making now, which, as I mentioned before, I have not worked on at all in this YouTube video, but it is so much fun. And I have used a different ball of yarn for every color of this blanket. It is just something that I've now memorized the different stitches for, so I can easily just sit on the couch and make it, and it's just really beautiful, a gorgeous chevron kind of blanket. So that is the man 6-day blanket. Then also another blanket that I love by Betty McKnit, which I think we all love, is the star blanket. I have made so many of them. A lot of people tend to use ombre yarn or color changing yarn, but you could easily use yarn from your yarn stash to reduce it if you wanted to, and it's just a lovely pattern. This Ultimate Stash Buster Blanket tutorial on YouTube is another fantastic yarn stash using blanket pattern. It looks like you use 2 strands of yarn, so it will work up really quickly, and it would be so warm, and they're double crochets, so it would be really easy for a beginner to kind of understand and be able to make one. You could make it whatever size you like. You could make baby blankets, or you could make huge blankets from this one, and it would be great for being able to use up lots of yarn. This is another retro flower granny square pattern. I mentioned the cardigan before, and this is the blanket version of it. It is so beautiful. Again, you could just be completely random with the colors you choose, and it would still look stunning. And I thought I would also mention that you could find any granny squares on Pinterest or YouTube or wherever you like and make a blanket. You could do simple granny stitch squares, or you could do all different ones, and that would be a great way to use your yarn stash and make a really beautiful blanket. And the last blanket pattern I'm going to talk to you about is this granny stitch pattern tutorial on YouTube. You could make a giant granny square if you wanted to, and then put a gorgeous border on it, or you could make a bunch of different little granny squares and crochet them all together. But this is like fantastic for beginners and great for busting your yarn stash. The final category for this pattern roundup is the homewares category, and we're starting off with this stash busting basket. So I have mentioned her a few times now, but Passionate Kelsey made some baskets in her YouTube videos last year, and they just looked gorgeous. She used up a bunch of scrap cotton yarn. You could use acrylic yarn too, but I would recommend using cotton yarn more because it's a bit more sturdy and will hold up better than acrylic yarn. It's another 2-strand yarn project, and you could put together a bunch of colors that kind of go together, or you could be completely random and it would still look gorgeous. Crocheting coasters is another great way to get through your yarn stash. You could make a bunch and give them as gifts for friends or family throughout the year, or keep them all for Christmas, or you could have all different coasters around your home and change them out for seasons or whatever you like. But I found this rag rug coaster pattern, and I just thought it looked so adorable. It kind of looks like a rug that you would have on your floor, but it's for your mug. It's a mug rug. And I just love all of those colors together. I just think it looks really beautiful. I do recommend using cotton for anything that is going to be related to heat, just because you don't want to melt your coasters. So yes, coasters is another great smaller size project for getting through your yarn. Mug cozies are also another smaller size project like the coasters that are adorable and great for using smaller amounts of yarn. I have a mug cozy crochet pattern here. You could use up to 6 colors, I believe, for this pattern, and you could make a bunch of them again to gift to people or to have for your own mug. And if you're anything like me, you drink a lot of tea and your mugs are hot, too hot to touch. So this is a very useful stash busting project. Granny stitch patterns for pillows are fantastic ways to use up yarn. And I thought I would include this beautiful granny mushroom pillow. So I know the actual, what is it called? The stalk of the mushroom. I don't know why I can't think of what it's called right now, is one color. But I don't imagine it would use up a huge amount of white yarn or cream yarn, but the actual cap of the mushroom is granny stitch, and you would be able to use so many different colors for that, and it would just look so adorable and whimsical. So I highly recommend that one. I think I'm going to have to make that one this year. I thought I'd also include this round cushion pattern. It's granny stitch again. It would be pretty quick and easy to make, and you would just find a round cushion insert. You could probably go to an op shop even and find an old pillow and do granny stitch to cover it. But yeah, I think it just looks really gorgeous and retro. And the last pillow pattern is this wildflower huggy burst pillow. So she's got sunburst granny squares on it and used a bunch of different colors, and I just think it looks so gorgeous. It would be great for on your couch or on a bed, and it's just very pretty. Bow related things were very popular, especially for Christmas last year. So I thought I would include this rainbow bow garland crochet pattern. You would use a different colored yarn for each bow, and it would be fantastic for getting through your yarn stash. You could absolutely use acrylic yarn or cotton yarn for this project. You could make it in Christmas related colors or Easter or even Halloween, or just make a rainbow out of it and have it up all year round, all colors to suit your home decor. But I just thought it was very cute, and I really wanted to make this one at Christmas time, but I ran out of time, so I may have to make that early this year. And the final pattern for this pattern roundup is potentially the cutest pattern, and it is this rainbow crochet tea cozy pattern. This one's a bit more of a simplistic one and great for getting through your yarn stash, and you could make it for yourself or you could make it for a friend. It's very vintage and gorgeous, and it may just be my favorite pattern from this pattern roundup. I hope you enjoyed this pattern roundup and got some inspiration. Let me know in the comments if you are planning on making any of these patterns, or if you are also trying to get through your yarn stash this year like me. Make sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and if you are not already subscribed, maybe consider subscribing so you can see more content from me in the future. Thank you so much for watching.